Yo, what up, YouTube in this motherfucking bitch. Today we're gonna be analyzing the game of the century by the motherfucking chess expert coming at you once again. What a motherfucking winner. In this game, played black against GM, young Christoph Duda, the Polish grandmaster. And it's gonna be an interesting game. We're gonna be following it move by move, while I once again spicing up the motherfucking video. Gonna be talking about social theory. Gonna be talking about none other than the motherfucking Pierre Bordieus or Bordieus, whatever you want to call the guy, sociologist from France, or the French school. You know, you got yourself Bordieus, you got Saussure, even though he's Swiss, who gives a fuck. And gonna be talking about him. Also gonna be talking about cultural sociology, which must be distinguished from sociology of culture. I might be talking about that later as well. Right, so let's talk about cultural sociology. What is cultural sociology? Let's talk about that while we view the game. Well, cultural sociology is difficult to actually distinguish from what you would call normal sociology, seeing as just all kinds of sociology or sociological analysis or projects all revolve around people, society, and culture. And one premise for culture, let me outlay that right now. There's many of them. Depends on kind of what academic direction you're in. Who gives a shit, you know? If you're talking about culture from a humanist perspective, say if you're a literature knower, if you're a musician, if you're an artist, if you talk about it in this sense, well, then culture is reduced in some ways to cultural artifacts. It's reduced to cultural objects, objects who in sort of many ways are manifestations of a certain culture. Examples like the realist literature from Russia in the 1800s, Trading Queen's there, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, you know, all of those. You have, and of course they represent the times in many ways in language. That's another discussion. That's a discussion for the motherfucking linguists and for the language scientists, philosophy, all this shit. Anyways, their understanding of culture is as such. Now, if you're an anthropologist, it's different. Then you're operating with a culture, like an understanding of culture is much wider. Seeing as anthropologists very often are out in the field, they are, many of whom have been visiting, for example, Aboriginals in Australia, several different native peoples around the world, and they operate then with a cultural what is the name? What a shitty word. I don't give a shit. What the fuck? Culture as a word which entails everything. everything that happens in society, everything that people do, everything must be included, not least in the analysis. Everything must be written down, understood, and put on record to really understand the culture. And that's usually what anthropologists do. Now, what sociologists do is be somewhere in the middle of it. You know, they are operating with a cultural understanding of culture that is more, well, it's kind of, you know, you have to talk about many things if you want to understand it. So sociologists often, in Saussure's and Barthes' spirit, operate with a cultural understanding which is where the weight is in many ways put on science, as they say. So and science in this fashion, well, let's talk a little bit about science actually. Let's talk about the theory of sociology, because it's actually quite important. It's about semiotics and the foundation of semiotics, which is, I think, defined as culture or cultural studies, being a study of science and meaning in science and language and things that can bear meaning. Now, Saussure, this is just going to be a very short introduction, but he introduces to a he distinguishes between the thing that can bear meaning and the meaning that we apply to it through our cultural understanding. So, for example, if you see a chair, that chair is in itself a signal, because it can signal to you a meaning, because you can understand what it is. It is something that bears meaning to us in our culture. And our mental representation of this thing is what Saussure calls signified. And there is a code, cultural code, that ties these two things together to make what we would call a sign. And of course, there's been people talking more about this theory. Roland Barthes, the French sociologist, he was also talking about it, and he applied more meaning to the theory by including a second layer of it, to put it like that, because you know, you had when you have your signifier and your signified, the signified being your understanding of the thing, understanding the meaning of the thing. In Barthes' theory, the signified, our understanding, is a signifier to what he calls a myth. Now, a myth is a deeper cultural understanding. It is connotations or associations that one has to the signified, to the understanding of the thing. Now, say for example in a picture of a person, there might be very many different signals. He might be wearing, or he or she or whatever, he might be wearing a t-shirt where for example, he's wearing a Metallica t-shirt, and he's got, long hair, black hair, looks like a rock and roll man, that's all signals. And you see the t-shirt, you see the signs, see the signals, and you tie it up to your mental representations, to your understanding. And out of that comes the conclusion of what the picture is representing. And representation is a different discussion. But let's just skip over that because you want to understand this. So, yeah, you might tie, what you like, what you get from the picture. It's an understanding. It's an understanding like this. Okay, there's a man. He's wearing a Metallica t-shirt. He's got long black hair. Right. Well, the deeper understanding that Bordieus is talking of as myth is simply that through your cultural understanding, through the culture that you live in and represent in many ways, you have a certain picture and a certain understanding. It might be a personal understanding, or it might be an understanding that you share with many people, that this is rock and roll guy, probably plays in a band. He probably, and you have your prejudice as well. Maybe you think, well, this guy probably is bad at school. This guy's an emo. He's an emu. Who gives a shit? But the thing is, it's a deeper understanding. The Myth by Roland Barthes. And this all goes into the sociological understanding of the word culture. It's, as I said, it's a study of culture, science, and of things that are bearing meaning in the world. And a science is anything that produces meaning. So they're operating with it is still quite a wide cultural definition. But the thing is that sociologists, instead of focusing primarily on whole culture, on whole people, every practice, everything they do that bears meaning, like social anthropologists do, sociologists might choose aspects of a particular community, particular environment, and apply certain social theory or methods to analyze these people. So that is that. Sociology is very heavily reliant on semiotics, as I said. So practically all sociological inquiry and sociological projects are hermeneutic and semiotic. Now, hermeneutics is, well, it's quite similar to semiotics. It is that you're doing research and trying to uncover meaning, that you study meaning and other people's meanings, while semiotics maybe is it's more focused on science in themselves, and science, as I discussed, in the tradition of Saussure and Bordieus. Now, let's talk about Bordieus. Now, Pierre Bordieus is one of the most relevant sociologists today, and he has been through the 20th century over to the 21st. His theories are still applied regularly by sociologists, his methods, and he's a very important figure in the world of sociology and in the world in general, in all social sciences. Bordieus has played a big part in the development of these social sciences. Bordieus' goal with his work was to uncover hidden or partially hidden, hidden in many ways, hidden structures of power, and to uncover these through his projects. And there's a lot to this. And I'll talk a little bit about the criticism that Bordieus has gotten because of his goal being uncovering power and structures of power within society. Because if you have a focus, if you have a theory to start with, you usually, there's a word for it, but you find empirical evidence that fits into the theory, and it just proves it in many ways, proves the theory. Anyways, so Bordieus operates with particularly three different words and themes in his sociological work. Now, the first of those that I'll go through is called capital. Now, capital has, of course, the intuitive meaning of the word. Usually people will associate capital with money and resources, in the spirit of Marx, for example. But Bordieus here operates with a wider definition of capital. He operates with different types of capital. For example, he operates with something called cultural capital, something called social capital, and symbolic capital. Now, before I go into this, I just want to mention the other two, because they are interconnected in absolutely every way. So, there's not one thing without the other here. So the two other things that he operates with are what you'd call, I don't really know what sociologists have called it in English, but I'll just call it spaces and what's it called again? Habitus. Spaces and habitus. There's not one thing without the other, and habitus is probably the most important one, but I'm going to talk about capital first. So, cultural capital, it shit, I just forgot the game completely. Okay, yeah. Cultural capital is, well, it's not really important what it is, but, well, yes, it is important, but the thing that the man is talking about, cultural capital, is, if we compare it to economical capital, it's wealth in knowledge and understanding. You know, and in different social circles, that will be valued more. And remember power when we're talking about this, because as I said, he wants to uncover hidden power structures. And power structures doesn't have to be a huge, governmental power, whatever. It can be in social circles. It can be whatever, it can be between two friends, it can be between 3 friends, 4, I don't know, it can be between many in a workplace, wherever, it's everywhere. Different types of capital will be valued differently according to what kind of social circle that you're dealing with. Now, to move swiftly on, I want to talk about habitus now. So, habitus is an extremely important word in Bordieus words, and it is the internalized social relationships, if you could say it like that. And it is about people's understanding of the need to adjust to and internalize certain ways of being, depending on what kind of social situation or place that you're in. Now, this is very important. People probably think about that sometimes, but he has outlined it in this. Now, so, for example, if your habitus usually is internalized in childhood. Now, habitus is everything. He talks about it a lot in terms of class. Like the working class is a habitus. And if you're born into a working class family, you will internalize the mentality of a working class person and the ways of being of a working class person. And ways of being aren't just ways of thought, it's also physical manifestations, such as clothes, such as body language, figure of speech. You internalize the social setting, trying to adjust. Now, if your habitus has been working class, being born into a working class family at an early age, you internalize this way of being to the social discourse with your family, with your friends who are also working class, and you internalize this way of being. Now, say if you're at a later stage in life, you get a good education, become a doctor, you change your habitus. You go into upper middle class ways of life. Now, to adjust to that, it's not always easy. That's what habitus is about. You have to adjust yourself. You have to adjust your taste, always be. If you work in finance, and you never cared for sailboats all your fucking life, but the only thing the guys be talking about is sailboats, you ain't fitting in. You're an outcast. You haven't been able to internalize and understand the habits that you have moved to. Yeah. So let's look at a game now. Let's look at a game. It's a motherfucking nail. A lot of fucking work in a motherfucking. But I want to also talk about Bordieus in his book Distinctions. I think it was in Distinctions. He analyzed sort of the differences in class in France in the 1970s, where it was very apparent the differences in class, and they were very visible. You had a cultural elite, an economical cultural elite, and then you had the working class. You had the poor ones, middle class, But the elite was very, very sort of outlined and clear, And in the upper class, elite classes, you had your particular tastes that were common, and this goes swiftly on to what I call spaces, because Bordieus, he invented a figure. Okay, I'm gonna try to describe a figure once again. It's a rectangle standing upwards, and you got yourself two lines going through it, one vertically, one horizontally, forming an X, or a cross, not quite a cross. And he splits these up so that in the bottom two squares or rectangles on the right side, you got yourself people who care about economic capital. On the left side, you got yourself people who care about cultural capital. But seeing as they're on the bottom, that means, because he operates in such a way that economic capital is sort of the most important one in some ways, because without money or resources you can't really do so much. So the rectangles on the bottom are the ones who have the least economical capital. Now if you go up to the two rectangles on the top, on the left side, you got yourself cultural people who value cultural capital, but who also inhibit economical capital. Now, people like professors, people in high cultural jobs inhibit these positions in society. And on the right side, on the top, you got yourself people who have very much economical capital, but who don't value cultural capital as much. And the point is that Bordieus writes activities which are sort of standardized for the different people in the different boxes. So on the top right, where you got your economical power elite, they be enjoying champagne, riding horses and whatever, they do whatever. And on the left one, on the top, you got yourself people of cultural capital who enjoy classical music, piano music playing, going to art exhibitions or whatever, all that stuff. So it's kind of standardized procedures. Now we're gonna go swiftly back to habitus again, because when a person, say, from the right rectangle on the bottom, the ones who value economical capital most, but who has the least of it, who has little of it. If a person is born into that way of life and internalizes that habitus, that person at a later stage in life becomes a cultural elitist. So he becomes a professor in the left rectangle on the top, valuing where he inhibits a habitus that does not value economical capital but cultural capital and knowledge. That person will not be able to internalize the social norms, the ways of life of that habitus. Okay, it might happen, but it might not. The thing is, it's more probable that the person will not be able to internalize these ways of being. And well, that is quite an important point in Bordieus' theories, really. Now, well, what was that I want to talk about? I want to talk about something. Let's have a look at a game. I'm just gonna think while I look at a game. Takes boom. Right. I'm gonna talk about something. As I was saying, the theories of Bordieus, his goal to uncover hidden power structures in society, has been criticized, particularly by the new culture sociology movement, with its different branches: the strong program, pragmatic sociology, repertoire theory, etc. And particularly one person from the strong program, strong sociology, was a person called Alexander. I don't remember his first or last name, but Alexander, not only him, but criticized Bordieus for his theories, because it in many ways becomes a sort of cynical and cynical hermeneutics, where, if you remember the definition of hermeneutics as the study of meaning, people's meaning, cynical hermeneutics then refers to the sociologist, the analyzer in question, being critical, overly critical to what the person is saying. Because what a person is meaning, of course, as he looks upon it as only a habitus, you know. So a person in a habitus might be saying, you know, oh, I love sailboats, you know. But then the sociologist will think, well, do you really love sailboats? I don't really think you do, because there is a power struggle here. Oh shit, I need to talk about power struggle. There's a power struggle. Okay, I'm gonna talk about power struggle after. There's a power struggle here that he's covering up. He is trying to adjust to his habitus, and he doesn't want to tell me that he actually fucking don't like sailboats, you know? You know what I'm saying? He wants to fit into the motherfucking game, but he's trying, and he's gotta lie his way through that shit to get accepted. Now, power struggles, important, very important. Of course, it's all about Bordieus this motherfucking bitch. If you remember the spaces that I was talking about, fucking rectangle. If you're in the left rectangle, yeah, then if you inhibit a lot of knowledge, if you're a knowledgeable person, if you're a cultured person, you will usually be seen as the most powerful in the social circle that you inhibit. And that's the power struggle that Bordieus is talking about. It's the same with economical capital in the right rectangle. If you have the most capital, you will be seen as the most powerful, and everyone wants to achieve power itself to some extent. And the reason for this, the sort of Bordiean sociological analysis then to be critical, overly critical of a person's, what a person says, his meanings, his or her meanings, is then because the sociologist will think that the person is covering it up because there's a power struggle going on. There's a structure of power that the person being questioned must fight in and adapt to in the habitus. Now, this was a little introduction, I'd say, to Bordieus' theories, and chessexpert coming at you with another fucking video once again on his motherfucking chess channel. Check it out, checkmate on thing. Get the fuck out of here. Like, subscribe. See you next time. Stay hot.